Hello everybody, Backyard Bullion here. So today I want to talk about a very interesting subject, and that is around Brexit. Now, I don't want this to be a political style video talking about the merits of why or why we shouldn't have voted to leave the European Union. What I want to talk about is how Brexit is going to affect me as a stacker of precious metals, how it's going to affect my buying strategy going forward when it relates to buying silver and or gold, and also how it's going to affect me as the sort of owner and operator of a small business. And I do a lot of trade with Europe, both buying all of my raw materials from Europe, but also selling my wares out to Europe as well. So guys, it is quite a controversial topic, it can be quite divisive, so if you want to comment on this video, I really encourage it. I think it's great to get a good bunch of comments going and a discussion going about this, but please remember to do it respectfully. Lots of different people will have different views on this subject, so just make sure that you do it respectfully if you want to. Now, I've also got out here a bunch of nice shiny things for me to show you guys as I'm rambling on. So all that said, Brexit is, for those of you who don't know, perhaps you've been living under a rock for the last 18 months or so, but Brexit is the process by which the United Kingdom is exiting the European Union. And it is happening. We have invoked Article 50, so in March 2019 we will be leaving the European Union. Now, for those of you outside of the UK and perhaps outside of Europe, this video might not seem that relevant to you, but I do think there's quite a lot of very interesting points to think about which might well affect the price of silver and gold globally as well as just in Europe. So well worth a listen, and it'd be great to hear you guys' thoughts as well on what we're all considering over here in the UK. So, as I said, we're going to be leaving the European Union, and we've invoked Article 50, so in March 2019 we will be leaving the European Union. Now, at the moment there aren't any trade agreements in place for after that date, so theoretically at the moment we'd leave the European Union and we kind of so-called fall off a cliff into the World Trade Organization trading standards. Now, why is this important, I might hear you ask? Well, I'll tell you. That's because in the UK we have to pay VAT on silver. It's not a new thing, you've heard me talk about this before, you've heard me do and show you the group orders whereby people can buy from Europe and we can get much, much cheaper silver. You put it in comparison, the cheapest silver coins that you can buy in the UK from a dealer is probably going to be around £19, £20 an ounce at the moment. From Europe at the moment you can buy them for £15 an ounce, so huge savings, especially if you're buying in enough bulk. So why is it important if we leave Brexit? So if we leave Brexit and fall back onto the World Trade Organization trading standards, then we in the UK, if we bought silver outside of the UK, we would end up having to pay import taxes on it, VAT essentially, on the equivalent that we would have bought if it was in the UK. So that automatically will increase the price of our silver. If we're looking to buy silver from anywhere, it's going to be either from the UK and we're going to have to pay the normal kind of VAT prices in the UK, or if it's from Europe we're going to end up having to pay import charges, postage, as well as possibly VAT as well. Now that is very important because you know, for us buying silver in the UK, it is going to be really, really unmanageable. It's going to be so much over spot. You know, at the moment spot's what, £12.50 an ounce, and we're looking at the cheapest coins in the UK at being roughly, you know, £18, £19 an ounce, depending where you're going to buy from. That's a lot over spot. That's a huge percentage just with the VAT alone. But you get, you know, the dealers, they add quite considerable margins on top of that sometimes as well. Certainly if you're not buying in very large scales. So gold becomes all of a sudden incredibly an attractive option because it's only 2% above spot. You know, you can buy, I think I bought this one at 1.5% above spot when I did. So it suddenly becomes a really, really attractive option, and that's obviously going to have a really big impact on potentially, you know, silver stackers within the UK. Now that could have one of two effects. It could mean that overnight your silver suddenly becomes a hell of a lot more valuable. Now, regardless of how the prices are going to be affected in the run-up to that fall off the cliff date, and you know, we don't know what that's going to look like, and it could be that there'll be a run on silver prices because people might think that overnight the silver is going to basically jump up by 20, 25, 30%. And that's because overnight, suddenly, the cheapest coin that anyone in the UK can buy suddenly doesn't come from Europe anymore, it comes from the UK. So right now, you know, these old Britannias, and you saw me drop one there, and I don't really care about dropping them because they're all, you know, just simple weight bullion coins. They really are just raggedy-taggedy old coins. And if I wanted to sell them, I could put them on the silver forum right now and I could list them for like £15 an ounce maybe. And I'm pretty sure that they would sell quite quickly. Maybe I'd have to drop it down to £14 an ounce if needed, but I'd still be able to sell them relatively quickly on the second-hand market. But if we've fallen off a cliff and there's no trading agreements and the cheapest coin that someone could buy in the UK suddenly is, 18, 19 pounds an ounce, then selling them at 15 pounds an ounce seems quite, a low offer, a low price, and maybe you could get away with selling them for 17 pounds an ounce. So all of a sudden, you've got a huge jump in silver prices. So you could theoretically, buy a crap ton of silver from Europe a couple of days before, the Brexit happens, and then sell it all on the secondary market and make a huge profit. I'm not sure how practical that will be because, a lot of the kind of savvy stackers out there, first of all, will be turning to gold, like I've sort of suggested here, but also, they'll be looking at this and thinking, I just think that silver's not worth it anymore, so the demand suddenly drops. Now, if demand for a product drops, we've seen it, it's just simple economics. Demand drops, prices drop. Supply will increase because lots of people will have silver, lots of people will have these coins, and all of a sudden the prices will perhaps start to drop. So if you take away the UK silver stacking market completely from, or the serious stackers anyway, from the global market, you could see that having an ongoing impact for people outside of the UK and in the EU in terms of silver prices and silver demand. And of course, all of these people who are buying silver now might well think to turn to gold, which again will increase the demand for gold. And if you increase the demand for gold, then the price of gold will increase. So you could see a massive stretching of the gold price versus silver price, and the silver-gold ratio could change quite considerably. Now guys, remember, this is all just speculation. I am not a financial expert, I am not an investment guru, so this is all just my own kind of thoughts on how it's going to potentially run. It could be one of many circumstances, and there may well be stuff that I haven't even thought of in this. But it's very interesting to think about how it might run, and for me as a small business owner as well, I've got to think about these types of things for Backyard Bullion. Running the small business right now, cash flow is obviously incredibly important, and part of that whole cash flow management is, I'm selling my products, and when I sell a product I get the capital back in that I've outlaid for the silver, and then I'm getting a small margin on top of that, which is the profit. And if suddenly I have to incorporate an additional 20% onto my prices to compensate for the increase in my raw material prices, me selling internationally suddenly becomes not so competitive. And I know right now that it's very expensive for people to be buying my handful of silver from from Europe. If you're in America, you're paying for international shipping, and obviously you're having to factor in the fact that right now I can't buy silver at 5%, 2% above spot like perhaps some manufacturers can over in the USA. So for me to suddenly increase my prices by 20, 25% overnight could be a really kind of impactful thing on my business, and the future of Backyard Bullion as a hand-poured silver business. So that's a very interesting thing to think about. So I've got things to think about in my head about whether or not I want to kind of go ahead and bulk buy a whole bunch of my my materials from Europe before Brexit, and sit on a huge mountain of shop for the next couple of years, and keep my prices as low as possible. But inevitably one day that might have to happen. It's just part of me living in the United Kingdom, which is quite frustrating. So the future of my business is potentially looking at whether or not it's going to be practical in the future to still operate or not. And that says, that's the same for a lot of businesses right now. It's not just me. And whilst silver is, one of those metals that is predominantly used in industry, probably there are probably other companies out there, and I know there's other individuals out there who, are starting to pour their own silver, and it's something very much to think about in the future, definitely. But I hear it a lot. I do a lot of I go to a lot of networking events for small businesses, and I hear a lot of people who buy a lot of their products and their raw materials from Europe, and if they suddenly have to start paying import duties on those types of things, it could literally put people out of business, which is a real shame. So I think going forward, for me, terms of stacking, let's do stacking first. So I think stacking-wise, very much the focus is going to be on gold. I think the premiums relative to spot is just the biggest factor for me. Obviously, there are other things to think about in terms of bulk, silver being very bulky when it's compared to gold anyway. But definitely, I think going forward, the attractive nature of not having to spend a lot of premium on silver is very, very attractive for me. Certainly when you compare it against the absolutely tiny premiums over spot that you get from buying gold. But there are some good things to think about Brexit in this context, certainly for my business and certainly for stacker and investor in precious metals. So one thing that I'm quite looking forward to is that you hear a lot about the opportunities that there might be there for the United Kingdom to get new trade agreements in place with different countries. So, it'd be very, very good to get an awesome trade agreement with the US so we can look to import stuff from the US. And it might well end up being that it's cheaper for me in the long run to import my silver shot from the US rather than to buy it in the UK, depending on how everything works out with trade agreements and things like that. And that would be a very, very cool thing indeed. And, things like buying graphite molds, it's just small things like that. If I buy a graphite mold at the moment, I'm paying a lot of money for my graphite molds because I have to have them custom made in the USA, I have to have them then imported, and as much as you can ask suppliers to kind of put the right terms on an address label, and get it to be sent over as a gift rather than a commercial entity. Ultimately, you are looking at buying stuff from a company, and if they're having to do their own books or they're having to put certain labels on it through eBay or through Etsy or all these different sites, then you can't really be asking them to fudge import documents. So a lot of the time I'm having to pay quite a lot of import duty on these graphite molds and things that I'm importing, which is fine. That's part of doing business for me, and I accept that, and that's fine, and that's hunky-dory. But what's quite exciting is that in the future that might change, and I might be able to get these graphite molds and things at a much, much more competitive price. And there's other kind of coins and things that come up in the USA that I'd love to get my hands on, but when you factor in all of the kind of import duties that you'd have to pay, it really just isn't worth it over here in the UK, unless you can get somebody to kind of have it delivered to them over in the USA and bring it back to you over here in the UK. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, and it's going to be quite interesting to see how that evolves over time. I know that for certain countries who buy my hand-poured silver, when it gets to them, you might be having to pay import duty yourself, and that might change, which will obviously have a really big impact on how how me as a business can run. If I still am having to put up prices and you can save a little bit because you're not having to pay as much import duty, then that's only a good thing for me as a little business. So that's quite exciting to think about as well. So yeah, let me know your thoughts, guys. I think it's a really interesting topic. As I've outlined a few things there, how it's going to affect me, I think, as a stacker. If you think I've missed anything, or if you think I've got something wrong, then please comment here. As I said before, it is quite a controversial topic though, so please be respectful of other people's opinions if you're going to comment in this video. Otherwise, if you like this video, please put a thumbs up on it. That would really help share around on YouTube. It gets everything put through the YouTube algorithm much, much better. And if you haven't already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you hit the little alarm bell next to that subscribe button, you'll get a notification when I upload future videos. Otherwise, all that's left for me to say is I hope you guys have a fantastic week, and please make sure that you like, share, comment and subscribe for more.